before and what now, before the clerk. But that record is burned, because my cousins, I sent them one of these, and they went in, and the nearest thing they could come up with was an Eckhardt, a Fred Eckhardt that came over in 1895, which I knew nothing about. So this Frederick Eckhardt came over in 1895, and here, like you said a while ago, they renounced their allegiance to the King of Württemberg.
Yeah.
On the 1895 one, that Fred Eckhardt that came to Ann Arbor renounced his allegiance to the Kaiser of Germany. By that time, they were a federated states. They were United States. And so during that length of time, he renounced the Kaiser. But this guy had a king. And I think another thing, what they didn't like about conscription over there was, you know, these kings had mercenary troops. You know, they kept a bunch of troops for hire. And, you know, if some neighboring king or some neighboring country came along and filled his hand full of money, why, he'd just tell these guys to go out and get killed, see? And for him, you know, they were hired troops. And, you know, this wasn't a very good deal. You weren't really fighting for your country. You were just going out for hire, and whoever wanted to pay the king the most money.
Renounce the king of Württemberg. Victor, did you ever see what they call those Risa pasta? Would be the equivalent of visa or?
Oh, rice. I see what you mean. No, I don't think so.
Those,
Although I'll tell you,
You mean their traveling papers?
Mm-hmm.
I got a copy.
passports.
I got a copy of the one Schmidt brother there, George. Raymond Smith, that used to run the elevator, had the original one. And then Larry thinks now that Raymond's son, young Raymond, has it. But anyhow, when Larry had a chance to see it, why, he had it copied over in English. And I've got a copy of it here. It tells about leaving the Neckar district, and the Neckar River flows down through Württemberg.
It has full description of the
Full description of the man.
color of eyes,
Yeah.
color of hair, kind of nose you
Yeah,
got.
yeah.
See? How tall you are.
Yeah, yeah, I've got a copy of it here, I'll show it to you. Does anybody lend any light on the formation of the
Church.
yeah,
Yeah, we should get there.
yeah, that would be
The formation of what?
of the church itself. Does anybody know? Did you ever hear anything about putting the church together, any of you?
I didn't know until I bought your book, or got it anyhow, whether I bought it or had it given to me, I don't remember, probably bought it. At the 100th anniversary, was it? And that my grandparents were charter members here. But they all came from Germany, and they're about the same place, and they were
Well, not so far
in
away.
a province where they were Lutheran Church.
Distance was
Oh, yeah.
close.
But of course they walked, and that through the mud, and that was something else.
Yeah, there's no road.
Oh, no.
When do you think they got their first horses? How long would they have been here before
Well, they
horses?
got oxen first.
Yeah.
I know that the first 6 cows that my grandmother said they paid something like $25 a piece for them. They lost the first 6. They let them run to put a bell on them, you know, let them run, and they'd go hunt them. And of course, I suppose things did dry up once in a while, and I presume they'd eat some stuff they shouldn't eat, maybe out in the woods, you know, some bushes or berries or something, and hungry enough. And whether that's the reason they lost it or not, but she said they lost their first 6 cows, and probably not all at once, but one to a time sometime. It's rather discouraging, you know, probably didn't have the one paid for before they had to go and borrow the money for another one. They were as bad off as Poland is today.
Did they ever say anything about the Indians as to what?
I think that at first there were a few Indians, but of course my mother is the one that would talk about Indians, because, you know, they moved to Reed City when she was left Ionia when she was 3 years old, and they lived amongst Indians. And my mother would tell me that they had a track up a railroad went through someplace, and her brother, the boys of the Indians, would go to Reed City, or wherever it was, I suppose, or down to Hersey, and get a little fire water. And that's the time when you should have left them alone, but the kids would tease them, and then the Indians would chase one of her brothers, and she thought they were going to get him one day. Well, anyhow, they came to their place, and in the wintertime, and of course they didn't have too many stockings or anything, and so my grandmother her mother knit them some stockings and mittens and whatnot. And one time they were gone and horse and buggy someplace, and when they came home, they wove baskets too, you know, and just like clothes baskets. And for the back steps, they set a clothes basket full of huckleberries for knitting the Indians that picked and brought. Yeah. But down in our country, I don't think that.
Well, Grandma Niethamer used to speak about the Indians, didn't she, Mother? And that they were pretty poor people. They didn't fare very well in this area.
There's only the name of one Indian that, as far as I know, that is known around here, and that's that Chief Sabi, that Sabi Lake's named after. There's a couple of rather humorous stories that are told about him. Both of them are in Holly's History of Woodland. But one of them is that some man that was married, but it happened that another woman was visiting him. And this Chief Sabi happened to notice it, and he thought this man had 2 wives. So he went there one day and wanted to strike up a bargain with him and get one of the women for his wife. And on another occasion, why, he came to somebody and said he had, I think he had some horses out in the woods somewhere. He said he wanted to, he'd trade them for what this guy had there and other horses. The guy wouldn't do it. He said, well, you go get your horses and bring them here so I can see them. Well, he says they're out there in the woods. Of course, which meant, of course, he probably didn't even have any.
Yeah.
But there was one bad incident, and that's when some men were going over to Jordan Lake, and there were some Indians repairing a boat. And they were, one of the men, white men there, was dared to, or either dared or else took it on himself to throw his hatchets. Of course, he was just going to see if he'd scare them or something like that. He did, I guess, hit the boat, didn't hurt anybody, but it almost caused uprising of the Indians here. Finally, the Indians were told that they'd get out. Didn't want them around anymore. So they left, but a number of them come back, but those that come back were never molested.
You know, get back to Dan. Dan told me that, of course, wood was awful cheap. To show you how cheap it was, even after they got so they could cut wood. He and John and Bill Boldman, his brother-in-law, they cut wood together one winter, and they split it and piled it. Of course, you know, there wasn't any sale for it. And the next fall, after it was dry, the next fall, there's a wood buyer came up through, and he told them that if they would sort it, all they wanted was slab wood. They wouldn't take any limb wood or any chunk wood. Of course, they could use it themselves, but they had to sort it. If they would sort that wood and haul it to Woodbury and throw it in the boxcar, they had to throw it in the boxcar, he'd give them 75 cents a cord. They cut it, left it set a year, loaded it up on the sleighs and hauled it to Woodbury and threw it in the boxcar and furnished the wood for 75 cents. You wouldn't make money very fast, you know. Vern, you got a better job than that. Yeah.
You mean my cutting wood now, you mean?
What's that? Well, either way, either way.
Well, I can remember back in the 1930s, when old Eve Lucas told Richard and Russell and I, if we wanted to make a couple pennies any day, we'd go over and pick stones off it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't want any money, did you?
I didn't want the 2 cents that bad.
It's too bad to talk about someone that's deceased probably, but you mentioned Lawrence Raffler a while ago, and I met him in Lake Odessa one day. He'd been working at the cannon factory. I met him right in front of Garlinger's Market, and he started to go like this, and I said, "What's the matter, Lawrence?" And he said, "I've just been up to the doctor." He said, "I can't work anymore. He tells me I got hardening of the arteries, you know." "Oh, that's been a long time ago." And hardening of the arteries. And I said, "Well, I don't know, Lawrence, if it's so bad. I have that too." And he said, "You do?" He said, "Who do you doctor with?" "I don't doctor with anybody." And he looked at me, you know, and I said, "Lawrence, you want me to tell you where that starts?" And, "No, yeah, I know. You don't know what you asked." I said, "That starts in the cradle." I said, "Once you start using the arteries, they quite naturally start to corrode a little bit." And I'm sure I have it by this time, Lawrence. I'm sure I got it. And think how many years Lawrence lived after that. Yeah, yeah. He put his hand and went like this, and he said, I've got hard-hitting actors, and I said, so have I. I was sure I had it. I just don't worry about it. I'm sorry, Pastor.
The founding of the church. Let's see if we can move into
I'm sorry.
the no apologies necessary. The founding of the church. Can we? There are some things in the booklet here, but maybe some things. This is our target area at least, so this is where we'd like to have a little bit more information if we could.
Well, as far as the organization, they first got its start when a number of these first Germans that lived right around here, George Reiser and them, they started holding prayer meetings at the, well, I think, the John Reiser, at the home of John Reiser is where they first started.
Where was John Reiser's?
This was Johann Michael Reiser. That would have been the father of, well, of course, you weren't here from John Reiser.
Edgar Rice's grandfather?
Maybe
Jake
so it
Ricer's
was
dad.
Edgar's grandfather.
And they've always owned this farm, haven't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
That's where, where they.
Imagine that was
Yeah.
a place, yeah, that'd be John Reiser's grandfather, wouldn't it?
That's
Or
a John
probably
The
Ricer.
John-
grandfather of John and George Reiser,
Yeah.
Yeah.
according to our
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Where was the farm?
Edgar's.
Edgar's. Okay, did that include this land up here?
No, this was Niethamer, and that was Reiser, and then the next one was Funk, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Over on the corner.
Yeah,
Mhm.
The prayer meetings started up then
at Edgar's.
at Edgar's.
That's what I'd always understood,
Yeah,
that was sort of the
that's what I
first.
understood before they were paid.
Yeah. Well, do you think that they built this little wooden church, that was built shortly after they put the congregation together, wasn't it? What is the date on that, Carol?
That was built before my time.
Yeah, yeah, and that was,
They had a log church here first, Grandpa said, and then they built that wooden one.
That was over there where the preacher's garage is.
Yeah, that was the one.
They moved it over there,
No,
or
that's where they
well,
built.
that's where the original church stood?
Because the stones, some of the stones are out there.
well, the
in front.
original,
I
In
thought
front of
it
your
was,
the
garage, there's
original
stones in
church
the
was-
garage there, yeah.
Margaret, I thought it was up here, and they moved it down there to the parsonage when they built this church.
Maybe the first one, but you know, when they built the school. School
Well,
was built down there.
Yeah, the original church was,
Right
from the
here.
time they built it until 1893, and then from 93, at first it was stood side of the brick church, was used as a school, and it wasn't until later when it was taken up to the parsonage.
but there was a log church ahead of the sod.
Well, if there was, I don't know anything about it, and Kettle didn't have anything in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, you think there was a log church first?
I've got that impression that Grandpa
There
said
was
they had a log church. I might be wrong.
Well, would it be that they had a log church, or that they got a hold of a log building which they used before they had their own church?
Oh,
You see, they were organized in 56, and it wasn't until the 62 before they ever built the church.
And that's when they
In
built the
talking-
wood,
Yeah, that's when they built the wooden
I'll bet they
church.
never had a log church.
Probably not.
In talking with Edgar Reiser, apparently there was a log cabin built in his front, what is present.
Well, that,
Yeah.
there's where it comes, because
Yeah.
even John Reiser himself said he was born in
It
the,
says it here,
yeah, that's where it's.
the log home.
Yeah, that's
Everybody
where
had
the
a log home
cabin
first.
came in.
Mhm.
I wonder who had the first sawed lumber or hewn timbered house down through here.
Probably all
I
about
don't
the same
remember whether
time.
Holly has that in his book or not.
I was replacing some fence posts for the horse corral, and going down so far, there's a cobblestone, and I don't know whether that was for stabling horses or was.
Down there?
Mhm.
Why, behind that garage down there, behind that church that you was telling, that was moved down there, they built an addition down there, and it was long enough to keep a horse in, and the buggy, and then back east of that yet, there was a chicken coop that would go out there about as far as the line fence went.
Mhm.
And it was high enough up above, so where you could put hay up above, you know.
Well, you could tell that something was there, and I
Yeah.
just speculated maybe it was with that, but I was wondering then too, that was the site of the school, or was,
The school part was an old church, and then this other, they built on to it was, you know, because it wasn't as high, and wasn't quite as wide either.
okay.
Weren't you telling me the other day, though, that the church is what you used as a school?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's-
German school.
German school in summer.
And,
Oh, it's more than summer,
yeah,
because the Luther boys, you know,
They
quit
went-
over there and went to the
yeah,
Lutheran school. Because
yeah,
I went to school with Vic and Carl, and
yeah.
the Kittle boys too.
It was
Yeah.
summer.
And I think for a few months, probably your dad.
We had always every summer. When I went to Austin Eckhardt School, and then in
Yeah.
the summertime I went to German school.
Yeah. But then later on, when Clintworth was here,
Yeah, that's
they had
right.
full-time school.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's when they pulled the Luther boys out,
Yeah.
and when they finished up what they went to school here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when you went to the Eckhardt School, was that in English or in German?
Oh,
English.
English. Oh, yeah.
But was this one in German or English here,
No,
when you went?
and it was German in the summertime.
They taught German?
Yeah, but Kenworth, he taught English to
Oh.
the Luther boys and to Adam.
Mhm.
And Kenworth had a daughter named Flora. Them four is the only ones I remember that went to that church school.
Ernest Edger was the county school commissioner, and for a long time, he let them get away with that, you know, and then finally the law, they put a stop to it. And couldn't anybody have parochial schools, you know, that is, they didn't come up to certain specifications.
Yeah.
I asked the boys, I came over here to, you know, when we was kids, and of course I had known the boys, and I asked them at the program over here at Christmas time, I said, do you have recess like we do and everything? And well, they smiled, you know, and they say probably about the time it takes Clintworth to smoke his pipe. Yeah.
He was a nice old man.
Yeah.
Awful nice.
Well, I didn't say anything against
No,
him.
no. He was awful nice. I don't know how long he preached, but, I mean, as a man, he was a nice man.
But Kittle was here ahead of that,
Yeah,
and I think he was a good man probably,
yeah.
because I think the boys were good boys, the ones I went to school with, been so long ago.
When Kittle was here, I went to work at Eckhardt School that time. Because he had a boy, and he used to take him over with a horse and buggy.
Theodore Kittle.
Yeah,
What was the
Theodore.
other one's name?
Willie,
Yeah,
Willie, yeah, I think you're right.
yeah. And then they had another one, yeah.
the girl.
Now they had a girl.
Theodore Kittle, I met him when I graduated from college. He happened to be there, and of course the way I do it is because my dad was down there, and he happened to see Kittle before, and of course he knew him right
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
But you know, that's kind of tragic about their Mrs. Kittle,
Oh.
that's Reverend Kittle's wife, because her mind went bad on her. In fact, when I graduated down there in Columbus, she was in the institute down there at Columbus, and we went down and saw her.
Hmm.
And when she come out, she was in a good rational mood. She recognized Dad right off as being a Brodbeck, but she called him Luther instead.
Oh, yeah.
She was,
Yeah. Luther and I walked to school on Monday morning. There was no track in the road, and we'd had a whale of a blizzard. And Uncle Jake had a fence up through there, cement posts that they made, you know,
I remember.
forms,
Yeah,
and there was just about that much. Here and there you could see the barbed wire, just about that much of the post stuck out, and the wind was blowing, about like it blew yesterday.
yeah.
And every so often, of course, we wasn't even a track, you know. Of course, I was just a kid, Luther was a little bigger, and we took our dinner pails along and went right into the snow up here part of the time. And you'd have to turn your back to it and get your breath, you know, and drive it right down your throat. well, we got up to school, it wasn't that far, half a mile, but we got up to school and he got a fire started and he got a nickel a week for starting a fire for the teacher. And so she'd come then after the fire was started and she'd spend 4 days, or 4 nights, I mean, say, usually boarded over Uncle Sam's. Well, originally they went around the neighborhood, you know, and stayed here a night and there a night or a few nights, but later on, I think she paid $2 a week and stayed at Aunt Lydia's, you know,
Yeah.
across the dead sister across the corner there. And nobody ever showed up. We were the only 2 that got out that day. Nobody ever showed up, and we stayed till noon. And I think we dug our stuff out, what we had to eat, and ate it while we was up there. And nobody showed up by noon, so we let the fire go and walked home. He was a little older than I was.
In our record somewhere, I have it written down, but it was a ricer that maybe they brought over. Was it little Mike Ricer, I think they call him, that they thought was gonna die on the ship coming over? That must have been an awful problem when you brought babies
It was
over.
Mike Ricer over here on the Lucas place.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Mike Ricer that, and Lorena Hilbert made a notation of that too when she sent me a copy of some of that family tree.
It was John Ricer's uncle because he always mentioned of him, his Uncle Mike.
He was a military man.
Yeah.
He
So
was
A military man.
He was a brother to Jake Ricer then.
See, was it Grandma Niethamer used to tell about, was it her mother that said that when she got to America that the first meal she had was mush and milk and how good it was?
Had they there?
Yeah. So I
Still
suppose-
good.
Huh?
Still good.
Yeah, but you can just imagine how good it did taste after eating all that dry bread and cheese or whatever they
Moldy,
could
too.
bring along, or
Moldy too.
it must have been,
Good drink of cold water probably tasted good.
my land, the only thing they could have probably had to drink coming across the cider, wasn't it?
Oh, they had barrels of water.
Yeah, they had
They put it
barrels.
in
How in
barrels.
the world would you keep a barrel of
Would
water very
be.
good?
Well, it wouldn't be good, it'd be wet, that's all.
That's about all.
Sure.
Boy.
Would it make you sick if it was stagnant like that or not?
They were hardy souls.
Mm.
Well, don't you imagine it, they depended more on cider and things like that to make it?
It's possible, but who do you think the ship owners would give their passengers anything
Any kind of
expensive
luxury like
as
that.
that? No, I
Unless you
don't think.
brought some of your own.
Unless you
I
brought
don't know.
your own, yeah.
Probably drank a lot of rainwater too.
If
Oh,
it
yeah.
rained, well, what in
Yeah.
the world did you do if you came across in the winter and it didn't rain?
Yeah.
Can you
Better be
imagine
careful
going
on
across
that.
that North Atlantic in the winter on a sailboat?
There wouldn't have been any heat either, would it?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Well, they probably were packed in that they really didn't notice the cold.
Oh, I don't know. I don't believe they could have traveled in the winter.
I doubt it.
I don't think they could have ever made
No,
it.
I don't think so either.
The storms would have been terrible
Yeah,
too, wouldn't
just
it?
Yeah.
terrible. Coming out of that.
Yeah, because this
North
letter says they
Atlantic.
came in April or something like that. See, that would have been a good time, you know.
Mhm, After Emil
Starting to
Baitinger
get
started.
spring.
Yeah.
After Emil Baitinger.
I actually
That-
think
that
southern
pastor.
Germany is a little warmer climate than where we are.
Cool.
A little milder.
Yeah, I
And
think
said,
Herman
"Don't
told me
you tell
that
that
they
tonight."
plant the potatoes
Oh,
and
he's
some
mad.
spring things the last of February there in southern part of Germany.
He thought it was a disgrace.
you know. But isn't it a funny thing that we're the land of the free and so on and so forth, and democracy. Yet, any place in Europe, if you could afford it, I guess there's never been a time when you couldn't own gold coins or gold if you wanted it. And they do own it, you know, the natives, they keep a few coins around for safety's sake.
Well, they have to, they change governments so often that,
Yeah, well, maybe change money occasionally
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
We haven't quite come to that place yet. Some morning you wait and we'll be here.
but we can buy our gold now.
Huh?
We can buy gold
Yeah, at
now.
a certain price, of course.
Well, same price they're paying now.
No, but they've always owned it, they'd be selling it, see.
Mhm.
They've always owned it.
A lot of them lost it during the
Oh,
war.
yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
And then Francis Hankspaw, that was in the Fisher, you know, he was an officer non-commissioned, I think, in the Second World War. And he told me that they put him in charge in the town because he could speak German, you know, came from Westphalia. And first thing they asked the natives to do, mind you, their own country never asked this. The first thing they asked the natives to do was to bring all the photographic equipment in, all the old swords and the old muzzle loaders and the old knives and anything, and that they had over the mantelpiece to home, you know, and had from grandfather to grandfather been passed down from wars hundreds of years ago, and that they had for keepsakes. Those people had to bring that stuff all in. And he said, I gave them a requisition slip. He said, they cry. These people would come in and they'd say, you know, we've had that for generations. Well, you present this slip after things are over and you can come back and get it. And he said, we knew when we told him that that never would happen. And he said, I had a house, and he said, I had 2 rooms in it, and I started right in one end, piling stuff up. Well, he said, after I got a nice assortment, well, he said the colonels and the majors came up with their suitcases, and they picked out all the good stuff. And they said to me, they said, you know, our boys back there don't get a crack at this, and we're going to take it back. But he said, I knew there was a tag going on those, and go right back to the States so that it'd be there when they got home. And those people never seen those again. But they were their own governments that were even quite restrictive. Never asked for that. They let them keep it. But of course, when an army occupation goes through, you do more or less what they tell you. And I used to have this grand and glorious idea that until I talked to Herman one day, that an army occupation, if they were American soldiers, were much different than the stories I'd heard about other countries. And he just looked at me and he said, well, you know, he thought I should know this. They're overrun with troops every 25 years. And he said, it's Greek site, you know, Greek site. It's wartime. It's not peacetime, it's wartime. And you ought to know that, see? Yeah.
I think a lot of people buried their weapons. One man that come from Germany not too long ago, he said he tore up the threshold and the boards in the floor,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he buried his guns under there, and some of those children have gone back, and I don't know if they ever found them or not, but they should be there. It was Leopold.
Didn't Bump just find one with his construction? I don't know how old it was.
So,
Where they tore the house apart?
yeah, and they
It
tore
was-
the back end off.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
You know, things got
Carol?
rather, pardon me, I'm going to quit.
Oh, I just had one question. Somebody was asking, you pointed to that section, I hope this isn't that sensitive area, but the new church was not to be larger than Albright's church. Was that, it is not known what Albright's
Was
church
there a
was.
minister with the name of Albrecht at the evangelical church going around the 1890s?
I don't know whether there was or not. There was a minister by that name, I'm quite convinced. When you mentioned that name, I knew
Well, the reason why I was wondering
I'd heard it before.
is because when our original brick church was built in 1893, it was designated not to be larger than Albrecht's church.
Oh. Well, I should, I think that we've got a list of them around the country someplace.
Well, what, do you know about what year the brick church was built? The original brick church of the evangelical church there?
It had been remodeled just before it was struck by lightning, just shortly before, and Dad said they had, the tower on it was so high, the steeple was so steep that they decided when they changed the church over and remodeled it, they'd lowered it about halfway down. And I have pictures of the church the next morning after lightning struck it. I think I have them up at church, but I should go and get them.
Yeah, was that a brick building at the time it struck?
A brick building, but it had one of these old original spires on, you know. And I was, well, I hate to tell you and keep telling you my age all the time, but I think I've got a picture there that somebody took while Dad and Uncle Sam and I were walking around the west side of the church the next morning after it burned. And there was a few walls standing up. There were a few walls standing
But
there.
it took the whole building down.
Oh, yeah.
Roof and all that.
Oh, yeah. They had the chances are that it was wood with brick veneer like they built them, you know.
Same way that ours was.
Yeah, and so, yeah, and that was in 19 9 or 10. The new church was dedicated, what I call the new brick church there, the one we remember in 1911. And so I think it was 1909 or 10, and it took some little time. And that church that you see with those art glass windows, and those windows cost $25 a piece, and my dad insisted that they have a certain type of pew and a certain window. And those windows cost them $25 a piece when they built that church. And I was janitor there when it cost $200 a piece to repair them.
Just to repair
To
them.
repair one. He went on his way, and they never found him for years. I remember him talking about Ralph Walker, and they finally found him. I suppose he changed his name. Down in Indiana, someplace, the southern part of Indiana, I think they found him. He had worked for a number of years there for a farmer, on the farm, and was a good-hearted man, I guess. And then they took him and brought him back and shut him up in Ionia, and he died there. Yeah, Ralph Walker. Shot his father-in-law in Megadeth, a policeman, and ran down the railroad. Of course, the officers probably didn't know which way he went and couldn't find him. And if they'd had a dog in those days, wouldn't have been any job. Chased my dad's horses in the dark and come and run across the field. I've heard him tell that he lived there in a little shack along the railroad track, and the boys used to start out evenings. He had quite a temper, and they teased him. And I guess he did tin work and, I don't know, various things. He worked for the day and did various things. And George used to tell me, Dave Smith, of course, was quite refined in his older years, but they say there's an awful lot of virtue at old age. and George used to tell me, his brother, he said Dave used to go out evenings and he'd stop his horse over there, and yell at him and get him started and then take off. And he'd come running out and chase him down the road or something. And I've heard, this must have been quite a custom in the old days when they wanted to have a little fun with the sleighs or the horses. They'd go down the road in the dark, and they'd call someone out of bed, sit out in the road and yell in the dark. And you got a lantern. See, it sounded like he was in trouble. And I imagine you got that shut off, didn't I hear you click that off? No? Oh, I'm sorry. And they stopped, somebody in the horse and buggy stopped and was going to have a little fun, and possibly could have had a few refreshments, and they said to Dazzle, have you got a lantern?
Apple cider, Tom.
Yeah, have you got a lantern? Yeah, I'll go get it. Well, it's an awful nice thing to have around on the farm, and by God, he got mad, and he chased them down the road. And he got a hold, they ran the horse, and he got a hold of the back springs, of the buggy, how they went crossways there, He got a hold, but they were going so fast, he couldn't get his feet up. He wanted to get up the buggy. And I can't remember, Dad said how far he hung onto that buggy. And he was afraid to let go for fear he'd smash his face when he fell down, I suppose. He was really stepping around.
Ernest?
Ernest, yeah. He ran a deuce of a ways down the road anyhow before he finally let go.
When you're speaking of people out and for something to do, what was it you used to tell about when they'd stop and it's your folks when they were young people and they would come up with some sort of a lunch? What was it? They'd make coffee out of
grain.
And then
And brown it in the oven.
yeah.
And then they would make baking powder biscuits and serve honey with it. And that was the refreshments for the evening.
That wouldn't be bad even in this day and age. The biscuits, honey.
You mean people would go through the country and just stop it?
Doing
and-
that?
No, the
That's what they
neighbors.
serve.
Oh,
They
the
don't get
evenings.
bread and-
Yeah.
They'd go, in the wintertime, they'd take a sleigh and gather everybody up and stop at a neighbor's house and wouldn't tell them they were coming, and they'd conjure that up for refreshments.
Well, it must have been a long time before coffee was ever into this country, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
else they couldn't afford them. They did roast their grain and put a little chicory in it.
Yeah, they raised
Yeah.
their own chickens.
Yeah, put a little
The
chicory in
garden.
it. Yeah.
There's still some of that growing wild around, isn't it?
Yes. I don't know if that's the same kind. But they dried it and ground it.
My mother told about how her mother couldn't speak English, and her dad taught her mother to read and write and speak the English language. All she could speak was German.
Yeah. I couldn't speak English when I was 5 years old and started school.
Well, I couldn't talk English very good either when I went over to Eckhardt school, but
Yeah.
you know, all the children that went there was from Germans.
Yeah, that's right.
And during vacation, we always, during recess or noon hours, we talked German between ourselves.
Right.
The only time we talked English was inside the school
Well,
building.
I was the oldest one in the family, and they did the same as they do in Westphalia. Amongst each other, they talk their brogue. They talk that dialect and talk German, according to whatever Bavarian dialect they have, or mixed with English. And that's why they still talk broken over there, and get the objects and the predicates in the wrong places sometimes. Then, when I started school and we started talking English, my father never went to German school except church, I always went to English school. My grandfather read the English newspapers and learned English to speak and write English and everything. But at home, they talk German. And of course, the kids are at home until they're 5 years old, At home, they always talk German. And that's why it's a heck of a job, for a Dutchy kid to go to school and have an English teacher. And I imagine it made them smile when you wanted to say something was nice and you said shame. And and I was going to ask you, and this is this is not relevant to the whole subject, because your sister, you think Sarah could still read German script?
I believe it.
Well, I'll tell you, the old-fashioned, not the English letters, the English letters I can read after a fashion, but the old German script, you know how it went.
Yeah.
Well, I found a couple of letters that Uncle John, I think Besmer, wrote to his mother, or to his sister, my grandmother, years ago. Amongst a lot of papers, they're yellow with age, and they're several, 2, 3 pages long. I can't read a word of it, but I thought someday maybe I'd take them. I didn't know who else to take them to, because your mother told me one time when I brought a letter up, that written in German script, that she couldn't see very good anymore, and she said, take it over to Sarah. And she said, Sarah, I think can read it for you. And I think she did.
I can read German script.
You mean the old-fashioned kind?
Oh, yeah, because that's what our records are in.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I learned German script years ago.
In the last 2 generations or so, the kids over there use English
Yeah, they
letters,
always- yeah.
German words and English letters. But that old German, that went up here
Well,
like this, it's different.
Yeah, it's a lot like the old English.
And then I have a grandson in Washington who wrote me a letter this winter, and he had 2 sheets. I think he's 10 or 11 years old. And he had 2 sheets of questions that he asked me. And he said, Grandpa, I don't want it typed, and I don't want it in longhand. I want it in cursory writing. And I said, I think I know what that kid needs, but I believe I better look it up in the dictionary. I want it in cursory. He said, I don't want it in cursory writing. So he prints real fine, the kid does, how kids are, I don't presume they can write longhand, but they can write real fine print. He did a real neat job of printing, so he asked me, a lot of questions you ever saw. So I tried to answer some of them. He didn't want it in cursory writing, he said. Think of it. 10 or 11 years.
I'm going to step in
I'm
because I'm
very
going
sorry
to
to-
need, no.
Let's get your church going.
I need to know some characters that might be potential players. And I'm wanting, some stories or some insights into some of the people here. Gottlieb Miller or Mueller.
Gottlieb Miller.
Mm-hmm.
This is Signers of the Constitution.
Signers of the Constitution. We've got a few more books, I think, upstairs too, but this is some of the signers. We know where that fellow?
That would be Jake Miller's grandfather, wouldn't it?
I don't,
Eli?
he was mixed up with it, but I don't know just